I think one of the key breakthroughs came in that season of time because the wrestling, the abrasion that was taking place caused that hard, real search of, okay, well, we stepped out of something. What is it exactly that we're supposed to step into? And I remember during that season, as he was going through a lot of shifts in his heart and in his mind, for me, it was a little bit easier. I knew why I was leaving. I knew where I was going to. I had that definitive wife. So in that sense, the transition was easier because very firmly I'm a person of faith. And I knew that I had been spent for a lot of things, selling insurance, selling, all kinds of stuff. And God began to deal with my heart, said, I want you, you've been spent for a lot of things. I want you to be spent for me. Well, that gave me a tunnel vision. It gave me a direction. And I think that in life transitions, the clearer the vision of where you're going to, the easier it becomes. Greg stepped out with obedience, but really was stepping off into like this black abyss of not really knowing exactly where it was he was stepping, and had to have a trust in each one of those steps. And so I think the real key breakthrough for him was about that 5-year marker. We were having a real honest conversation about where he was. And he began to ask some questions that gave him then his new true why that allowed the transition to take place. So maybe you can tell about that.
Sure. Yeah. I reached sort of a place where I was the end of myself and really began to seek and search for purpose again. And I asked Julie, I'm like, what would you ask to help coach me through this? And so there were multiple questions that she asked because she loves to ask questions. She's a great coach. It comes natural.
I'll drive you nuts with questions.
One of the questions that she asked me, Joe, that was so significant was where had the fruit in my life come from? Where had the fruit in my life up to that point come from? And it's such a powerful question when you're seeking direction and you're seeking purpose, because it begins to point us back to sort of our natural inclinations, the things that have served us well over our life. And although it had manifested itself in a lot of different ways and a lot of different arenas, really what it boiled down to was leadership. There were two things. It was leadership of people, and God's just given me a gift for being able to lead people, and I've also studied it for years as well, so that would make sense. And then the other one is family. It's really in the uniqueness of our marriage and the quality of our relationship, and even the relationship with our kids and how we parent and the relationship that we have with them. And so with those two things, I had two big clues to begin to build upon. And as I began to apply myself, became successful in the corporate world, doing corporate speaking and keynotes, a lot of corporate coaching gigs and so on and so forth. And then I began to feel yet another tug at my heart for another transition.
Welcome to Titans of Transition, featuring real-life stories, anecdotes, and inspiration about pivotal career moments from leaders who have been there.
Hey, I'm so pleased to welcome Julie and Greg Gorman from Married for a Purpose.
Married for a Purpose. Woo-hoo.
All right. Awesome. Listen, I'm so excited. We finally got together. We had a couple scheduling conflicts, but we hung in there with each other. But I'm really excited. And as you know, my theme of Titans of Transition really is around the whole idea of transitions, obviously, as the name implies. But I really want to really explore with notable leaders, others that are doing significant things, how they got to doing what they're doing today, how they knew it was the right thing to move into. I know you have an interesting story here. And just, what teachings or what learnings we can then let everyone else in on to hopefully make their transitions as they think about changes they might want to consider doing a little less painful, a little more productive and successful. So with that, why don't you take a couple minutes and just tell the audience here, people joining us, what you guys are up to now, just a brief synopsis. We'll dig into that a little bit more later, but just what you're doing, and then we'll talk about your transitions.
All right, so I'll lead out here, Joe, and then Greg gets to tell all the dirt on us of what got us to where we're at. We are actually extremely passionate about restoring the family. We believe that when we get it right within the four walls, that's when we get that ripple effect across the country, across the culture. Because if we can't get it right underneath of our rooftop, it's hard for us to get it right in society. And so we're passionate about providing fundamental truths, principles that help to restore the family unit, where every family member, husbands, wives, kids, all know that they're loved, all know that they are accepted, and all know that they have value. And so we are passionate about being able to provide principles for parents, principles for husbands and wives that really lead forward into a purpose-focused type of living versus the problem-focused living that our mind tends to try to narrate to solving issues or solving problems. And so we help people move forward towards the future and the desires that they really want. That's it in a nutshell.
You want to say anything about that, Greg? Is she got it right?
I'll tell you, man, she did a really good job summarizing it, which she always does. So I shouldn't have expected.
Oh, look at that.
Less.
See, we're getting along today, Joe. It's going to be a good day.
Seeing how we minister to families, it's good to have a good day here in ours.
It's a good thing. Well, as fellow members of the Maxwell team, I've actually dropped in on some of your seminars to check you out when you were in Colorado and I was living there, and seeing you in action. So it's one thing to see you guys just on purpose now and just serving together, which is just wonderful. But I know there's a transition story about how you got there. So maybe you can go ahead and jump into that.
Sure. Yeah. I think, I'm going back to your intro and thinking about transitions, and there are a lot of different transitions that we could talk about, and probably all of them would be pertinent. There were some early transitions in our marriage where the first several years of our marriage, we were that couple. No, not that couple, that couple. That couple. And the truth is we almost didn't make it. There were probably about 7 years in total that our marriage could have gone one way or another. And legally, the whole time we stayed married, but there were a lot of days where you wouldn't have known that we were legally married. You would have thought that we were opponents rather than partners. And so there's that transition, which is not the transition we're going to talk about today.
All right, that's fine.
That's enough. That's framing.
Fair enough. So I'm thinking about how we left corporate America and being wildly successful in that environment to completely switching industries and beginning to do what we do now. And there's a couple of different transitions we'll talk about in that. But the first one is just when I began to leave what had been my corporate career, and Julie and I had both been working together in an office. We were wildly successful by anybody's standards, making over $1 million a year and just really highly sought out. Our corporate office was flying people in to, sometimes 4 and 5 at a time to shadow us for an entire week just to watch what we were doing. And it wasn't that it was anything special necessarily. We were just really leading by biblical principles in our business. And as we did that, then we were blessed. And but the transition came when I became very restless in my spirit, and I felt like there was something more and something more meaningful that I wanted to do. I didn't particularly like the ethical practices of the organization I was working with at the time. And there just came a point where my heart couldn't turn a blind eye to it any longer, and I knew I needed to do something different. And so I left that industry. The problem was I didn't leave that industry and go into it. I didn't really have any clarity. And so maybe the first lesson for our listeners or viewers today is maybe grab that direction in what it is that you're headed towards before you abandon what it is. And even in that, honestly, I'm thinking about over the years, so many different coaches that we spoke with and people that are making a transition into public speaking or just into anything. And sometimes we have a tendency to abandon what we're doing, like I did, too quickly. And we just create a lot of hardships for ourselves. And starting a new business, as it is the case in this case, always takes time. And usually the truth is it takes more time than what we bargain for or what we anticipate that it will. It's always going to be a little bit harder. It's going to take a little bit longer, and it's probably going to cost a little bit more than what we anticipated on the front end. And I think if going into it, I would have known that. I think people had tried to tell me that, but I didn't really anticipate what was to come. So what happened is I walked out of being in high demand in every place that I went. We were well plugged into our community, well plugged into our church, and we were highly sought out, as we illustrated there, by our company and our organization and our industry. And we then moved out of the area. We actually transitioned twice during an 11-month period of time. We moved from Kentucky to Texas and from Texas to South Florida.
Okay, so you left a career and you thought, well, as long as we're making changes here, we might as well move too.
Right. Yeah. Just make it easy on ourselves.
Do it all. Yeah, which was insanity. Julie and I had a conversation, and we said, if we ever start over again, let's do it someplace warm. And so we thought, gosh, people in Florida have to work for a living too, right? And so, yeah, we made all those decisions at one time, and it was a bumpy landing. So much so, right, Joe, to be honest with you, during that season, I completely lost myself because, again, remember, I had been very highly sought after. And so here I am. We've got no support system. Nobody knows us. And we're really, really struggling to make ends meet. Yeah. So much so that I can remember a time where Julie's in the kitchen and she's washing out little plastic baggies so that the kids will have a plastic baggie to put their sandwich in. We owned a small convenience store. Never do that again. Anyway, we owned a small convenience store, right, at the time, and I was bringing home expired snack cakes so that our kids would have little snack cakes to take to their lunch. So I could go on and paint that picture, but you get the idea. It was tough. We literally felt guilty every time we went to the grocery store because we knew that the groceries are going on a credit card that we didn't have the money to pay for. And so it just wasn't what we were used to. Remember, we were coming from $1 million plus annual income. And so we're about 4 or 5 years into this transition and just trying to figure out what's next. We tried a couple of businesses. One of them was losing money hand and fist, so we got out from underneath of that. Took on another business that, in fact, we're finally getting ready to sell and transition out of today. And
with a little bit more wisdom than what we did the first transition.
And I came to, I guess, a crossroads during that season, Joe, where I really struggled even with my own self-identity. And even my faith. I'm like, man, this all didn't go like I thought it was going. I felt like I had sought God. I felt like I'd been obedient to what we're people of faith. And so we felt like we were doing what we were supposed to do, kind of playing by the rules, if you will. A plus B is supposed to equal C. But, sometimes in reality, it just doesn't work out that way. And so I found myself kind of in a place where I had no purpose and I had no vision for the future anymore.
So I'm just going to stop you there just for a second. You've said a lot, but I think it's really typical. First of all, it's really typical for people to make shifts. The coaching framework, are you moving towards something or moving away from something? And so oftentimes what you're currently in is very painful. In your case, over time, there's this abrasion to your spirit that was happening, and you had to deal with it. I mean, after a while, you just couldn't ignore it anymore. So yeah, it'd be great to be able to plan, ramp up what you want to do on the side. Everybody always advises that, but we need to be gracious with ourselves. Sometimes you just can't. The other part that comes to mind is, especially for men, but I think it's for women as well, your significance is so tied up into what you were doing career-wise that when you make a shift, that's gone. And all your relationships and all your supporting, reinforcing your significance in that environment, that's gone. And so it can be I can totally resonate. I've made some of those shifts in my career too. So I think a lot of people will resonate with that. But that was 5 years in. It does take time to ramp up a business. So go ahead and continue. But I think those are real key things, Julie, you're thinking about. popping in there, are you?
Yeah, so, well, I think one of the key breakthroughs came in that season of time because the wrestling, the abrasion that was taking place, caused that hard, real search of, okay, well, we stepped out of something. What is it exactly that we're supposed to step into? And I remember during that season, as he was going through a lot of shifts in his heart and in his mind, for me, it was a little bit easier. I knew why I was leaving. I knew where I was going to. I had that definitive wife. So in that sense, the transition was easier because very firmly I'm a person of faith. And I knew that I had been spent for a lot of things, selling insurance, selling, all kinds of stuff. And God began to deal with my heart, said, you've been spent for a lot of things. I want you to be spent for me. Well, that gave me a tunnel vision. It gave me a direction. And I think that in life transitions, the clearer the vision of where you're going to, the easier it becomes. Greg stepped out with obedience, but really was stepping off into like this black abyss of not really knowing exactly where it was he was stepping, and had to have a trust in each one of those steps. And so I think the real key breakthrough for him was about that 5-year marker. We were having a real honest conversation about where he was. And he began to ask some questions that gave him then his new true why that allowed the transition to take place. So maybe you can tell about that.
Sure. Yeah. I reached sort of a place where I was the end of myself and really began to seek and search for purpose again. And I asked Julie, I'm like, what would you ask to help coach me through this? And so there were multiple questions that she asked because she loves to ask questions. She's a great coach. Comes natural.
I'll drive you nuts with questions.
But one of the questions that she asked me, Joe, that was so significant was where had the fruit in my life come from? Where had the fruit in my life up to that point come from? And it's such a powerful question when you're seeking direction and you're seeking purpose, because it begins to point us back to sort of our natural inclinations, the things that have served us well over our life. And although it had manifested itself in a lot of different ways and a lot of different arenas, really what it boiled down to was leadership. There were two things. It was leadership of people, and God's just given me a gift for being able to lead people, and I've also studied it for years as well, so that would make sense. And then the other one is family. It's really in the uniqueness of our marriage and the quality of our relationship, and even the relationship with our kids and how we parent and the relationship that we have with them. And so with those two things, I had two big clues to begin to build upon. And that's when, right around that time period, is when we became a part of the John Maxwell team. And it just seemed right. And I think that people had said to me that I should consider being a business consultant or a leadership consultant over the years. And I just disqualified myself so many times. It's like, well, I don't even know what that means, or, how I would get into that. And so when I went through the Maxwell training, it was awesome because it gave me permission. It gave me permission as much as anything. It gave me a community of people around me to support me who were like-minded. And I think that helped us tremendously during that season. But the other thing is it just gave me permission, because it's like, okay, now I have had some training. Oh, okay, this is how you do it. And as I began to apply myself, became successful in the corporate world, doing corporate speaking and keynotes, a lot of corporate coaching gigs and so on and so forth. And then I began to feel yet another tug at my heart for another transition.
Which brings us to the second one of our combined together then.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Did you have any thoughts or questions surrounding that piece, Joe, before we carry on?
Before we pivot to that, also a person of faith. So, I really lock into the parable of the talents and this whole idea that God has gifted us in a unique way, each of us individually. So without thought, and you have a plan that you might want to script for yourself for your life, it may not be serving the kingdom of God, it may not be God's purpose, but it might be your plan. But your gifts can still help you be successful, right? So your leadership ability, your ability to sell, your ability to persuade, whatever that may be, that's still that unique gifting that God has given you, but it's not necessarily applied to the mission, if you will, that he is calling you towards. So it sounds to me, and I could be reading this wrong, Greg, but it sounds to me that you reached a lot of success, but then at this point where you kind of went through this deep search with your coach here, you tapped into, how do I take this gift that God has given me, that I have been successful with over the years, but now apply it. Maybe where was the fruit? The fruit is the other side of how has God blessed you in applying your gifts to his plan and purpose versus your own design, maybe to be a bazillionaire or something like that. So now you take those things together. Now you're really, truly on purpose, utilizing the gifts that God has given you.
Yeah, and there are so many layers to that learning. Julie's got, give that quote about what you often say. I don't want to steal it from you, but it's not saying, here I go, God bless it.
Oh, yeah. So, we think about faith, and faith isn't conjuring up this noble notion saying, okay, God, here I go, bless it.
Right.
Faith is really, it's that essence of understanding what God has spoken, hearing what it is that he has for our lives, and then simply aligning our life to follow after it. So no matter what comes our way, faith is going, okay, I hear it, and then I follow it, come what may. I was thinking about that season too, and before we actually transition to the next one, that season was pivotal for us.
Yeah.
We needed that breaking season. I call it the Gideon season of life for us. It was the place where God was breaking everything in us so that his identity could be formed in us.
That's right.
So that our character could be refined, so that now with where God is taking us, there's no doubt who gets the glory in that. Because we were doing everything right. And sometimes in transitions, you're doing everything right. You're even following in steps of obedience, but the A plus B doesn't equal C. And so what then? And so in all of that, what God was dealing with us in our hearts to prepare us for this season, where now we're going to be meeting with presidents of countries and radically restoring the face of God in family in such a way that we believe it's going to change our culture and bring back common decency and value and honor and respect and love and all of those things. That's a lot bigger than Greg and Julie Gorman. And so in that season, what we realized is God was humbling us so that as we were given different new platforms, new places of what the world would deem as successful, we remained unchanged because our character was refined in that season in particular.
So I want to dovetail back to something that you talked just a little bit about and that Julie alluded to, that I feel like is just a really key point, and somebody out there that's watching or listening to this probably needs to hear it. And that is, for me, you reference this so often, our identity can be tied to so many different things, and most of those things have to do with our level of performance. And so I often say when I refer back to that season, like, I don't want to order up another plate of it, but you couldn't buy it from me. And that's the truth. Like, you couldn't, because it changed who I was from the inside out. My identity truly is no longer tied to my performance, my business, my bank account, other people's approval. I mean, we all like to be well liked, and we like to have lots of money in the bank, and I'm no different in that way. But I think what was happening is I was getting fleshed out there in such a way that my identity would be in God, in my true identity and who he says that I am. And in that, it has equipped us now to be able to handle both the accolades and, quite honestly, the criticism. Because if you're making a difference, the likelihood that you're going to get some pretty strong criticism is very, very high. And so we've got thick enough skin now, I think, to handle that. And so although it was very painful lessons to learn, they're incredibly valuable and probably the central source of our happiness and contentment today, whereas it was tied to so many other things in the past. So hopefully that helps somebody.
Yeah, there's huge amounts there in terms of getting off outcome and being obedient and Yeah. Our plan, our idea of outcome and what would be a blessing to us may not be what God has in mind. So there's lots there, but why don't we go ahead and keep going forward?
Sure.
The next transition.
So the second transition, and these all kind of dovetail off of one another, which is why we chose this path. But the second transition was when I owned a couple of businesses, and we owned a couple of businesses, and we're speaking in corporate America. Julie was doing a lot of ministry work as well, and was speaking all over the place, and had a very renowned team of women that she was speaking alongside. And then I kind of felt this heart tug, like, we need to be working together again. And this was for about 6 months. So I tried to drag her into what I was doing, and she just wasn't having it.
I'm like, no, I know where I'm going. And it doesn't involve that.
Yeah. And so we fumbled around with that and frustrated each other more than anything else for a little while. And then again, I went back to those original questions. It's like leadership and family, our marriage. And we had done some marriage speaking and had even written a couple of books at that point on marriage and relationships. And so I just approached Julie one day. I'm like, babe, I said, I really feel like we need to beginning to merge our worlds again back together. And so as we began to work together, this time a little bit more slowly and methodically, although we still thought it would happen faster and things would come together more quickly, and, had all these grandiose ideas about how that would go, we began to methodically think about the unique approaches to our teaching, both from a biblical standpoint and from what we had learned together over the years about leadership and coaching other people. And so that's when we really landed on what has become a central pillar to what it is that we teach today, and being purpose-focused, not problem-focused in marriages. And it was a real catalyst moving forward to what has become a unique brand. We noticed that in the thought leadership world and in business, it's not uncommon for us to hear teachings about, the power of our thoughts. But many times, because of who and how those things were popularized in the secular world, a lot of times the body of Christ tends to toss those things out, thinking that it's too much about self-empowerment and, all about me and things of that nature. And fair enough, it can be perverted to become that. But the Bible is full of lots of different examples about how it is that we're to think. And what we realized is that if all thought leaders throughout time, whether they're Baptist or Buddhist, agree on one central purpose, on one central thing, and that is that we do in fact become what we think about, then it's really important that we think about what we're thinking about. I mean, like, really begin to take stock, particularly as a married couple, because what happens is we put our best foot forward, and I'll pass it to you here in just a sec, okay? We put our best foot forward during courtship, when we're trying to catch our mate, when we're dating them. And then a lot of times, for a lot of couples, what happens is we get married, and then we get comfortable, and as we get comfortable, we become complacent, and then we start trying to fix our mate and change them to be like we want them to be. And we focus on solving problems even as a couple. And then if we get enough courage after we begin to start having some problems to go and see someone to get help, all too often the person on the other side of the table wants to do that as well. They want to talk about the issues. Well, let's focus on these issues, and let's begin to get some resolve on these problems. And what we realized is that the problems are actually a springboard. That if we can recognize that there is a problem, it's not that we ignore that there's a problem, it's that we ask a different question. Instead of how do we fix the problem, how do we fix one another, how do we change one another, it is, what is our desired outcome?
Right.
And when we change that from trying to fix problems and issues all the time to solving problems and solving issues all the time, when we just ask the question, what is it that we want? What is the desired outcome? It changes the whole energy of our focus, because it's completely forward moving now, instead of looking back here into the trash all the time and getting in a vicious repetitive circle.
Yeah, absolutely. If we focus on problems, we focus on the bad, we will uncover more and more, we will amplify. And brain chemistry is such, there is universal truth, what you're talking about. God doesn't have a problem with universal truth. He created the universe. That's fine. But we will amplify that messaging to ourselves and in a sense, manifest more of that in the future, rather than, as you're saying, focus forward into the outcome that you want to have. And it's a much more positive way of living. And it's just, we are in a culture, we are in a situation where we have so much of the other that it's such a great reminder. Yeah, go ahead, Julia.
No, and that I think that's what happened, Joe, is, he was really pulling for us to pull together. And so as we panned back and we started looking, what made our relationship? How did we go from fighting every single day, where we loved one another passionately, but we fought just as passionately, to where we were, right? Fast forward quite a few years, to the place where we were truly best friends and we were pulling in the same direction. And it really did land on that central truth that we had a common vision. We had a common purpose. There were certainly things that we disagreed with, but in those places of disagreement, what we had learned to do, not from a teaching place, but just from that school of hard knocks, we began to dissect what was it that actually worked and helped us. And what we realized is that as we were pulling together, for example, in parenting, Greg is a person of excellence. He'll drive our kids up to the mountaintop. He'll pull them up, kicking and screaming, right? And they're going to land on the mountaintop. They might be dead, but they're going to be there, right? He's going to bring them up. And then I'm the opposite. I'm like, oh, baby, you're created on purpose, for a purpose. You can do anything you put, I'm this epitome of an encourager. And so when I would look at him, I'm like, you're exasperating our kids. And he'd look at a woman, get them up, your skirt tail, because the world's going to chew them up and spit them out if all you do is encourage them. So who was right in that?
Yeah.
And what we realized is, wait a minute, what is it that we really desire? Because we were button heads. And so what we desired are kids who are well-adjusted, who are prepared for the world, who know who they are, who understand why they do what they do, not just because we told them so, and so we wanted
and who know they're unconditionally loved and celebrated as well.
And so as we pulled together with that, we quit fighting against one another and fighting with one another for that desired outcome. And so when we talk with couples, we were using these principles of, they would say, we have nothing in common anymore. And we're like, really? Well, do you both want peace? And inadvertently, you'd see the head start nodding. Do you both want to feel loved and respected? Well, and you probably don't mean to make her feel unloved or unrespected, right? You want her to feel loved and respected, and they're doing one of these, and the same thing to the wife, to the husband, and all of a sudden it's like, and you guys probably really want to leave a strong legacy. And we went down this proverbial place where we knew that they both agreed on, but they had allowed the specifics to separate them. And so all of a sudden they're like, oh, wait a minute, maybe we have something worth fighting for. Maybe we're not as far apart as we thought we were. And so those were some of the things that as we were talking and as we were dreaming and believing and painting our future of where we wanted to be 5 years, we realized it was together, and it was helping other couples, and it was helping businesses, and it was helping kids with their parents and their parents with their kids, because the fruit, the evidence of our life, the secret sauce isn't just Julie Gorman in ministry and Greg Gorman in business. It's really about the operation of blending all of those talents and gifts together to restore family. And so as we move forward towards that, we found a lot of life there. I think in the transition, a couple of things that helped us, because we were being a little bit more methodical than just jumping ship. We were trying to figure out, okay, what are maybe some of the steps? But there was also a place where you can't let what you don't know stop you from remembering what you do know. And we used that as a central part of the transitions, even in this COVID season. There were a lot of unknowns that took place in our business as speakers, right? Our primary place was speaking in churches. And so it came to this place of, we knew why we existed. And so we got really level with ourselves and talked to our fear and just said, okay, there's a lot of things we don't know. But what we do know is we're called to marriage and family. We know what we're called to do. So let's rethink this. And what does that actually look like to be able to make those deposits? So don't let what you don't know stop you from remembering what you do know.
You know,
And don't let what you
powerful.
can't do stop you from remembering what you can do.
Can.
And so the first part of it was really, okay, well, we know for us as people of faith what God has called us to. It was unmistakable. There was no movement. So we reminded ourselves of all the times in the past during those Gideon seasons, even washing out bags, we still made it through. And we built our faith that we were together and we were united. And come what may, we always had one another. So we let a lot of the things, and it pushed out the fear, the things that we didn't know. We didn't know how.
It's a forward-moving thought too. It's
Right.
really easy in life in general to get in a habit of thought. Well, I don't know this, and I don't know that, and I'm not sure about that, and there's so much uncertainty. And I think it's just a very empowering thought that Julie shared with me. Don't let what you don't know keep you from remembering what you do know. Because again, that allows you to focus on something that is solid, that will move you forward. So,
Well, and then the second part came from Greg, where he built on that thought of don't let what you can't do stop you from what you can do. And sometimes I think in transitions, right? We're talking about transitions.
Yeah.
Sometimes the only thing you can do is the next step. And it's just to
Right.
do that next right choice, that next right decision. And we realized that we needed to build our reach through relationship, through personalization, through spreading a message of hope. This world, more so than ever, needs to know the hope
Yes.
that still exists, and that if we combine together and build in commonality of what we truly desire and want, there's life there. And so we've never felt more empowered. We've never had more doors opening up. We literally have opportunities to sit before presidents of other countries now at this point. And it hasn't been because of our ingenuity of genius.
well, or some
It's been
rocket
through-
science
Fast
marketing
track.
plan. That's another thing. I think as people are building businesses, you can fall prey to a lot of different shiny nickel syndrome. Like you just need one more tool in your box, and if you just get that tool, that'll be what does it, right? Or marketing plans. We've known in business for years that the most abused fund within an organization is the marketing funds. And it's easy. There's a lot of snake oil out there on the market as it
I was
applies
thinking
to,
just
right?
that. I didn't want to say it.
And I would just tell you, like, I'm not speaking against building funnels
No.
or doing social network marketing. I think all of those, we're doing some of those, and we're going to be doing more of them. But what I will tell you was the catalyst for our business, and has been, and we have more clients than we can deal with right now. That's the truth. So much so that we started certifying other people to do what we do with our methodology so that we can duplicate ourselves and pass them on. But the way we did it has been through relationships. It's absolutely been by supporting other people, by doing what you're doing and interviewing and letting them tell about what they're doing, and just connecting and supporting other people for their events and promoting people, and just simply being for there. And like Julie said, constantly carrying a message of hope that's contagious. We're hope dealers. We want everybody that comes in contact with us to be smoking some hope.
I love that's great. Thanks for revealing your private conversations. Well, before we pivot sort of to the final thing about what you're currently highlighting in your business, I just wanted to just highlight that what I heard was, this framework, this unique secret sauce, if you will, this framework of what you can do, don't let, what you can't do get in the way of what you can do, and the thinking part as well. That's a powerful framework, but it was all the success of all that and what you've been able to accomplish was also tied back to the shift you did in your thinking to focus and get aligned together on your future vision calling. Those two things together then packaged together allow you to show up fully. And that's extremely attractive, right? And I think that that's probably that combination. And I'm just, my view of it, just from listening to you, is extremely attractive. And that you are valuing relationships and people being successful in their marriage and building your families as well. It's not just, how many more, what's the click-through rate, or what's, you know what I'm saying? What's the conversion rate? Yeah, those things are valuable to a point, but it's so much more than that. So I just appreciate your heart and your spirit. The one thing I saw that recently, looking your site, is this whole membership thing you have launched. I don't know if that's what you wanted to highlight, but to me, it represents a great pivot in a way through COVID, but also a great new paradigm to bring your message out there.
I'll lead out on that and then pass it to Julie to elaborate. Just very quickly, over the course of a couple of decades of doing this, we've just created a suite of products. So we've got several books, we've got several different video series. They're all designed for people to be able to do them in the privacy of their own home. They're designed for busy couples of today that don't have hours and hours, to sit and try to ingest content to make their marriage better. But we're about kind of that 1% model. If you just improve just a little bit and you're intentional about it, this week, if it's just 1%, someone said, then over the course of a year, without compounding it, you're 52% better than you were last year. And that's a lot better. Mm-hmm. If you compound it, it's even more than that, like significantly more than that. But I'm not able to do that in my head. And so with that, a few years ago, we launched a program, and there's multiple different ways to onboard into that. But right now, why don't you just go ahead and carry forward from that and tell them a little bit about the program and what.
Yep. So marriedforapurpose.com is the website. They can go there. They'll find a place to join membership. The idea is they get to talk to Greg and I about any subject, physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual,
and
business,
or all the above.
Or all the above. We usually do a short teaching that leads people forward towards their desired outcome and in their life and in those domains of their marriage, their family, their business and career, right? Their faith, and their community. So we talk about finances, communication, intimacy, but it really is for that forward movement of what is it that you want? And that is the most important question that we help couples and families, parents with their kids really land on with that desired outcome. What does that look like? And you get in that place of vision and then be able to work back and you find your steps to be able to live that vision. And so we do that throughout the course of a year. With short video teachings and interactive phone calls, and we do all of that for $39 a month. That's awesome.
That's pretty good value, if you ask me.
Value has been from the people who have been involved. Their takeaway, kind of the benefit, if you will, is that it's very bite-sized, so it makes it doable, and it's encouraging. And so people often comment that they feel hope again when they were in what felt like a hopeless situation. And it's doable. And then, again, you get the benefit of a community around you, too, of other imperfect people who are trying to get it right. And that includes us. So,
and what's fun about it, too, Joe, is it's filled with a lot of business, what we call couplepreneurs. It's people who are doing business and life together and all the craziness that comes along with that, some insights how to work well together and work forward. So it really is a relationship-centric type group.
Yeah.
And then the final part of that I'm really excited about is our Married for a Purpose certification. And so we know that you speak to audiences that are movers and shakers. They're kingdom builders. They're the ones they're out there. They're the entrepreneurs, and they are in a lot of life transitions. And so we actually, if you're passionate about marriage and family and making a difference in this culture, we have a certification that can equip you to do that and to lead other couples into that place where they have a clear vision and are moving in the same direction.
Indeed.
Oh, man, that is awesome. And just speaking to you guys out there, do check out the website. I'll put in the show notes the links associated there. And guys, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. It seems like our time is too short. I know you have more work to do here coming up in the next few minutes, so I got to let you go. But thank you so much for being on Titans of Transition. Maybe we can have you back after a while to check in again and see what other things you can, other nuggets you can drop on
That
us.
sounds awesome. Thanks, Joe, for having us.
What a great honor, Joe. Thank you
I love
so
ya.
much.
Thank you.
Love you too. Take care. Hey, thanks for joining me today on Titans of Transition. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please check the show notes for additional information. Also, please like and subscribe to this channel.